I'm Becky Fawcett, mom by adoption, an infertile blonde, a female founder, and a businesswoman. In all the podcast rule books, they tell you have to have a formula and you have to do everything the same for every episode. Mine is not going to do that. I don't like rules. For most of my life, I tried to be perfect and do what everyone else was doing and follow the rules. And then I tried to have children, and that's where things got interesting. That was the plot twist. So now I look for any opportunity to be different. I'm an outspoken advocate who wants to change the world. It does get me into trouble now and again, but for the most part, it helps me make real connections with real people. That's how I found my next guest. Welcome to my podcast, The Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you're here. And my guest today, I met through an introduction. And one of the best things about Help Us Adopt is once people find out about us and fall in love with the work that we do, they tell other people. And I have met the greatest people in 18 years. I met Jonah Nigh, who is a stand-up comedian and a public speaker and a lot of other things, but he speaks on diversity and inclusion, which is what really interested me in having that conversation with him. And then I found out that he was also adopted. So pretty much sealed the deal. So Jonah, thank you so much for coming on today. And I can't wait to hear more of your story and share it with the world.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So you were backstage doing a comedy show, and a friend of mine who I also met through an introduction, you guys started chatting. She's a mom by adoption. You're an adoptee. And the next thing was you have to meet Becky Fawcett.
That's right. That is it. It is such a strange thing because I mean, I do put it in my set. Obviously, it's a lot of my origin story, and I talk about it. And I think she just wanted to know my set. She hadn't seen me perform before. Then we oohed and awed once we found out we had a special connection. And you know this, it is like a special club. It's so misunderstood as a topic from both ends. When you find somebody who shares the point of view and the worldview and also a sense of humor about the whole thing, it's really a delight. So she and I became best friends, and then she told me about your work, and I was like, let me know if I can help.
It's great. And so, as you can all imagine, we got on a Zoom, and that was the end of that. But listen, I want to talk about first, I always talk to my kids about this, and people always ask this about my kids. Do you remember when or how you first really understood adoption or that you were adopted?
Yes, I think my parents, so I was adopted in the late 70s. I was born in 1979. A lot of things have changed since then, but my parents did a good job just normalizing it, telling us. It was very apparent too, because my family is multiracial. My parents are white. There were other Asian children and another white child in the family. So it was always evident on some level. But I think the first time I really sat with it was I was in kindergarten. I grew up in Minnesota. I was the only kid who was not like Nordic looking in my class. And I was at recess, and my friend Camille Erickson and I were playing a board game, and she asked me if I was Black. I didn't know. I truly didn't know. I was like, whatever, 4 years old or 5 years old. And I said I didn't know. And then I went home and I fact checked. And my mom sat me down and told me again in more detail about how the whole family came to be and what adoption meant. Over time, I learned the nuances between how my older brother and older sister were adopted, what it meant that they were born in Korea and I was born in California. So I felt like that was how I really started to understand it. And it was just very matter of fact, very Midwestern explanation, no drama, just this is what happened and that's your story.
So, your story just made me remember something about Jane, similar to yours, but wait till you hear this. I'd totally forgotten about it until you said that. So Jane, I think it was the first summer she went to sleepaway camp. I think she was 10. It was the first time that she was going away from me where I wouldn't be like blazing the trail because I wave the adoption flag first and foremost. I want everybody to know that we're a family by adoption because I think it's the coolest thing. So of course the camp knew she was adopted, but this was the first time she was going to get to go and be the one blazing the trail or not blazing the trail. I didn't know what she was going to say. So when I picked her up from this session, she was there for a month. I said, so how was it? What happened? And she's like, it's really weird. And I said, what do you mean was really weird? She goes, the first night we were together in the cabin, we had to sit around in a circle and we had to tell our bunkmates something about ourselves that you couldn't tell from face value. And I said, what was it? She goes, duh, Mom, I'm adopted. And I said, what did your bunkmates say? And she goes, they didn't believe me. And I didn't understand. And she was like, so for those of you who are listening, I am a Caucasian, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman. And Jane is a Caucasian, strawberry blonde,
Mm.
blue eyed woman. And so that's our descriptors. And she said to the kids in the cabin, she's, what do you mean? They said, you're not Asian. How could you be adopted?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And I was like, oh, well, I didn't see that coming. I go, well, did you educate those kids? She's like, I sure did.
Yeah. It's really
But
like
it is funny how kids have stereotypes about what adoption looks like.
totally. I have friends who have adopted children that resemble them or are the same race, and I've talked to them about there's almost like a coming out process that they have to consciously decide every time they engage, particularly because it's such a socialized thing to say something when you meet a young child and their
Mhm.
parent, like, oh, you have your mom's eyes. With ours, it was so obvious. My mom's a Russian Jew. My dad's a Southern Baptist from Texas. It is so obvious that it goes without explanation. Also, because of geopolitics at the time, late 70s, Asians were being adopted a lot in the Midwest. It was not uncommon to just meet other Asians in that area of the country with Jewish names. Like my
Yeah.
Asian friends' names were Amelia and Naomi and Ari. That's what I thought a classic Asian name was when I was 4 or 5 years old.
But, I learned it also the hard way as a mom by adoptions because my kids do look like they came out of my body, which is just
Mhm.
fate. And there's no rhyme or reason, but in my mind, fate. And I would see, I'll never forget this. I went to a Christmas Eve service in a church, and I'm not really religious, but I went because I wanted the kids to hear like Christmas caroling in a big church because it's very beautiful when the organ plays Christmas carols. So I sit down in the pew, and there's this woman, a white woman with an Asian child. And I'm thinking, of all the pews, I get to sit next to another family built by adoption. And I said to her, is that your daughter? Because I learned you don't say is your kid adopted. Even as an adoptive mother, I had to learn that the
Right.
hard way. I said, is that your daughter? And she sort of looked me up and down and moved to the other side of the pew. And I was like, oh, she thinks that I am going to call it out. I felt.
Mm.
I don't know. It was so strange. And I was so upset by it because she assumed that Jane and Brooke came out of my body because they look like me. And I
Yeah.
was trying to make this meaningful connection. It's just bizarre, I
It is.
guess.
It goes the other way too, because like my mom, who's white, had all these Asian children, and then during the day we'd do errands, and some people would stare or ask her things like, "Are you babysitting?" It can go the other way too, like whether they can't
Yeah.
assume that we're her children.
Yeah. And that's why I always try to say, I've learned now. I say, is that your child? And I go, you might not know it, but they look like they came out of my body, but we're a family by adoption too. But
Yeah.
I've done it in airports. I do it all. And my kids are like, this is mortifying. Stop it.
The more
But it's been,
mainstream, I think, the better. And there's a great show. We were just talking about it before we started the show Task on HBO. There's a small plot line of an adoptee, a multiracial adoptee family, and it's handled so sensitively. And just sat up straight when I was watching it because it is so rare for it to be
yeah,
dealt with with nuance in mass media and whatnot.
no, I agree. When I was adopting, Desperate Housewives was huge.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember that show. I'm a little older than you are. And I loved Desperate Housewives. Everybody did. It was the show. And then I'm watching it one night and someone's stepson kills someone else on the show, like stabs her to death. And they find out that the stepson is adopted. And the storyline goes dark.
Hmm.
Murdered someone because he's adopted.
Right.
And I remember sitting up, clicking the television off, and being like, that's the end of that show because those are going to be my kids. People are going to be saying that stuff about. And like, if this is how the media portrays families by adoption,
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
think it's like
oh,
gross public
you know,
misunderstanding that most adoption is somehow associated with trauma. And sometimes it is. But I remember The Moth is a storytelling competition associated with SCR.
fascinated with that.
Yes, and I did it once in New York, and 3 of the 10 of us competing did adoption stories. Mine was the only sort of lighthearted one, and the other 2 were very dark and a lot of, I didn't know who I was until I met my biological parents, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I thought it was really interesting, and I was glad to be up there because my story was just very different, and I was hoping it would show the extremes of what.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this. Like adoption is not all smiles and rainbows all the time, but family period, is not all smiles and rainbows. But for some real reason, adoption gets this bad rap. And there are some terrible things that happen to kids.
Yep.
That's why starting Help Us Adopt and sharing these stories about the good things that are happening in adoption and how adoptees get to find out who they are and become who they were meant to be through this new family that is built through this app.
The understanding is better about it now. Certainly, when I was adopted, the typical adoption was closed. I don't have any knowledge of or relationship with my biological parents, and that's fine. And that was also just typical of the time.
Yeah.
And now
Right.
things have evolved more to a push for open adoptions, having some sort of open channel of communication between the parents and the adopted parents.
I'm a huge advocate for open adoption. And I think that some adoptees are fine with having a closed adoption. I know a few birth mothers who are not fine, that they didn't get to know where their child ended up and how they were doing. And I always say a lot of work's been done. Like people have listened to those stories of that you were piece with you was missing. And I think that's why so much work has gone into open adoption. And there's no perfect solution, but
Yeah, it's funny.
um
It's like another planet to me, the idea of knowing my biological parents. And I've joked
yeah,
out because my parents have remarried. When people sometimes ask me, do I want to meet my biological parents? It's like, I have enough parents. The idea of having this other world, this solar system of other parents, and certainly at my age at 46, like having to establish a whole new relationship. I will
yeah,
say, however, with genetic testing, things like 23andMe and Ancestry, I have opted in. I'm not
right.
actively seeking it. I'm more passive, but 23 has located third cousins, that kind of thing. So nothing's super close. Who knows? It's out there, and maybe one day I'll be connected to somebody.
And I get how that could be odd because for me, we weren't given the option. We were told when we were adopting that you will have an open adoption and it's the end of that. And that was scary to be
Mm.
told that. Now, my kids don't know it any other way and they love having open adoptions. I just talked to my oldest daughter's birth mother the other night and we always laugh because she is something to Jane that I will never be, and I am something to Jane that she will never be. And together it works. But we respect each other in the roles that we play with her. And Jane, we all benefit.
Yeah.
But I could imagine if you grew up not having that, that the thought of it is odd.
Yeah, and my friends who have had closed adoptions have then somehow gotten in contact with their biological parents have had mixed reviews, let's just say.
Yeah.
I've had some who have had meaningful exchanges, and then I've had some that have gone awry and
Yeah.
have been very detrimental psychologically.
Yeah. Listen, family's complicated. That's what I always say. It really is. So, one of the funniest parts about your story, it's not really the funniest part, it's the cutest part about your story. How were you delivered into your family as a baby?
Yeah. Yeah, so my parents, they initially wanted to adopt too, and so they did. They adopted my older brother and older sister from Korea, different agency, I think. And then they came over to the States when they were about 2 or 3. They're not exactly sure how old they were. And then the agency, I think it was Catholic Charities Services or Social Services, they were told by my biological parents they wanted me placed in a home with other Asian children. It was like one of the requirements. They had my parents' profile, so they called them, I think it was Christmas Eve, must have been 1979, and said, "Do you want a baby?" And my mom was baking cookies, and she's like, "Yeah." My actual delivery, they like stuffed me in a Christmas stocking, and they had little candy canes in my hand, like waving them at my older brother and older sister. Yeah, it's very funny. So I joke, I was like, I was a freebie. I was an
Oh
add-on.
my gosh. These days now, they're like, so you want a baby, and it's a 2 to 3 year wait. So
Yes. Yeah.
I understand why your mother said, sure,
Yes,
let's
it was
do it.
not in the plan, but then just life was like, this is the right home for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's great. And how has it differed with different stories? Because
Mm.
international adoption is a little different than domestic adoption. Was there differences growing up? And
Yeah, I felt like I had the happiest of circumstances, born in San Francisco, given up pretty quickly, very happy, healthy, all that kind of stuff. And then I think my older brother and older sister, they had more issues. They were in Korea, they were in orphanages, they had more the other extreme of adoption. And so I knew that. And I think because of that, my older brother and older sister expressed more interest in knowing about their past, probably than I did. They had Korean names at one time. So I think there was more curiosity. They didn't really act on it, but there was more curiosity where I was just like, these are my parents and this is where I'm from. And that's my story. So I was very nonchalant about it. Wasn't really a deep thinker about it.
You've shared stories about your mom with me, and she really sounds like a dynamo.
Oh, yeah. I had to learn it from somewhere.
I mean, she really sounds like
Yeah.
she had you guys, and then she had a biological child.
Yes, she had again, so they planned for 2, they ended up with 4. So then my younger brother was born, he had cerebral palsy, because I joke, because God decided our family wasn't diverse enough, so let's just absolutely look like a huge mix, and it again, though, it's so funny when people say, like, "What was it like having a disabled brother or other adoptees who were from a different country?" You don't have this other parallel life
Yeah.
to compare it to, that's just life. I certainly was aware of the otheredness, especially in living in the Midwest, and
Right.
that was not
Yeah.
of being
Yeah.
stared at. And I'm sure that's where some of my acerbic kind of humor comes from. Racism in the Midwest is very passive aggressive, which is better than aggressive aggressive, I guess. But you get the undertones of it and you learn how to deal with it. And the way I learned how to deal with it was being audacious, mouthy,
Yeah.
words with people when I felt like there was some sort of aggression coming at me and my family. And I certainly learned that from my mom too, how to defend.
Yeah. I think that's part of the reason. I just decided very early on in my own journey with adopting my children that, like, I was just going to put it out there because what you put out there, the world can't use against you. Like, I couldn't have children. I'm infertile. Someone once called me, "You're barren." I'm like, "Oh, you used a different word than infertile. Good for you." Okay, fine. But look at these amazing girls. And I've always asked Jane and Brooke, what's the hardest thing about being adopted? I don't want to be the mom that says our family's great and my kids think it's totally normal. I want to know, did I not do something? Did I not talk about something? Maybe I did and you still feel this way. I want to be open and honest with them.
Mhm.
And both my girl, Jane says that the only thing hard about being adopted, like you, it's what I know. I am adopted. This is my life, but it's the way the world reacts to the stigma. When people find out I'm adopted, they go, oh. And Brooke says she finds it a great connector. Like the way you and I were like, oh, we're in the same club. Brooke feels the same way. So when she meets other kids and they go, I don't want to talk about it, she hates that.
I think one of the consequences of closed adoption, certainly that I live with, is because I don't have access to medical history. Whenever I have to do the intake forms, whenever I'm getting a new
Yeah.
doctor or something like that, I always have to put a big asterisk in the family history section. And so
Mhm.
I think I've probably been more prone to earlier testing for this, that, or the other thing, or extra precaution because I simply don't know what's in
Yeah.
the family.
Yeah.
I also don't know how I'm gonna age, which has been a funny bit to use in material for a comedy because, again, my parents are white. I have no
Right.
idea when I'm gonna really start losing hair. I have no idea when the wrinkles are gonna show more than they're showing now, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I look at other Asian people, older Asian people all the time, and I'm wondering because I can't assess either how old they are. So,
Right.
like, I wonder how old they are. Can I ask them? I'd like a crystal ball to look into my future to see how I'm gonna age just for vanity's sake, and I
Yes.
don't have that.
You know what's interesting though? And again, I know it's different, but we have open adoptions. I know the birth parents. They're in my phone. We could text them right now and talk to them on this podcast. But I don't really have all the medical stuff
Mm.
either. And because some of the parents weren't involved when the birth parents were young, I don't know where they are. They could have died of cancer. I don't know. I don't have that. And it's now like Jane's 20. I knew some baseline stuff 20 years ago, but I don't know what's happened to some of these relatives in the last 20 years. And I feel, again, different, but when I have to fill out the stuff for the kids, I feel pang too because I have to disclose that they are adopted. And while I have direct contact in some ways, I don't have the clarity of medical history that I have with my family. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have that for them. And it's interesting now, though, because the doctors, they're more aware. At least here in New York City, they're very aware of that. And they usually say, we know how to accommodate for that, which is lovely that they are becoming more attuned to adoptees. and their stories and to try to make that a comfortable situation.
I think in any big sort of sophisticated healthcare system, the doctors are just, they don't even bat an eye. But as the
Yeah.
one filling it out, there's a momentary, almost like a record scratch. It's like, I don't have all the information that would be helpful for my healthcare team to help make the best
Yeah.
decisions for me. Because of the testing things like 23andMe and stuff, I remember when I told my doctor I was going to take one, and he's like, what do you expect to find? And I was like, I want a big reveal. I need, I think it would be really funny if it was this or that or the other thing. And of course, there were no big reveals. But I think it would have been fascinating had those existed when I was 4 or 5, because some of the
Mhm.
tests that they run are, some of it seems like pseudoscience, but things like, oh, you're probably lactose intolerant. Oh, you have a high
Mhm.
density of fast twitch muscles, meaning that you may
Mhm.
be predisposed to being a good runner, or things that end
Interesting.
up happening, or your face turns red when you have alcohol. Things that
Mhm.
obviously, as a 46-year-old, I have already discovered about myself.
Yeah, I totally get that. And it's so interesting. I think it's like what you were saying of how people would stare at your family in the Midwest. And here in New York, it's pretty diverse. But when I tell people my children are adopted, they say they don't look adopted. What does adoption look like? I don't know. It's so interesting. And then there are so many transracial marriages and relationships that there's plenty of non-adopted. I don't know. I get very confused even as a mom by adoption with what to say there.
It's really funny that the nature and nurture piece of it, though, because although my older brother and older sister were not biologically related, obviously we grew up in the same home. And I remember I posted a photo one holiday season of just like me and my sister. And we both happened to be wearing gray hoodies and we're like smiling. And I posted it, and someone just wrote casually, like, oh my gosh, you have the same smile. And it is funny to see from an outsider's perspective
Mhm.
what nurture sort of overtook. Even my husband will be like, "You have similar laughs." I do think my sister and I look a little bit alike, even though we're not from the same families, and I do think a lot of that is mannerisms of obviously growing up together. So it's just an endlessly fascinating, I think, conversation about what family is, what home is, how you learn your behaviors, because biology is not everything. Obviously, you see twins all the time who couldn't be more dissimilar in their
Yeah.
composition of or predisposition to acting certain ways.
We have to make sure that we talk about your comedy and how you bring adoption to that. And then I definitely want to talk about your diversity and inclusion speaking because that's why Help Us Adopt exists. Let's talk about your comedy and adoption. People want to know about it. So I think it's great that you have this.
Oh, it's a great party trick, Becky. I
Yeah.
mean, it is. I
Yeah.
have so many things I can throw on stage: gay, Asian, Jewish, adopted. But I've obviously lead with adoption, and I don't think that you can teach someone to be funny. I think you're either funny or you're not. But I do think comedy is something that is learned over time. It's an art form like anything else, and I take it as seriously, the craft of it as seriously as when I was an opera singer for 9 years. I have lessons, I have coachings, all that kind of stuff. I think the one of the best pieces of teaching I got about comedy was write what's true first. The funny will come
Okay.
later. And
Okay.
so with adoption, it is really easy. And what I love about doing it is it always gets people's attention
Mhm.
once I say the word adoption. Like I know I have the audience because it is still so rare. In a room of like last Friday, I performed for like maybe 110 people, and I do a call out. Maybe 2 or 3 people in the audience were adopted. And that's a
Yeah.
neat one.
That was going to be my next question. Like, I always threaten in a restaurant when people are saying something about it. I go, it's everywhere. Do you want me to stand up? Because I guarantee you, someone in this restaurant
Yeah.
is either adopted or an adoptive parent. And people are like, please sit down, Becky. Please sit down.
Yeah, it's
But
hard
it's
to
everywhere.
it's hard to tell with comedy because when I do the call out for like, is anyone else here adopted? Most people don't, rightfully and smartly, don't want to engage in crowd work at a comedy show because they
Right.
think I'm gonna pick on them. And I
Right.
don't like that kind of crowd work, but they don't
Right.
want that. So I'm always 99% of the times it's dead silent. And that whenever there is somebody, maybe once or twice, I'll get 1 or 2 people. But 99% of the times when I do the call out in my set about is anyone else here adopted, it's dead silent. And then I have a jar for
Well,
that. And I,
I have a theory for that too. I did an Instagram live yesterday with a mom's group and it was great. But we were talking about from the mom perspective of being infertile and IVF not working and miscarriage and all these things and why the jump to adoption is so hard for people, including me. It was not my jump I wanted to make. And I said, because no one talks about it. No one talks about any of this stuff. So I think when that was one of the reasons I just decided, I'm like, I have nothing to lose. I could care less what people think of me. I'm going to talk about all this because my only hope is that someone behind me goes, oh, she was scared too. I feel a little better about myself now. And I think you probably throw people off guard when you say adoption because I still find that people are like, do they know? I'm like, you're kidding me, right? They're standing right next to me when you ask, do they know? To my kids, they still think it's a secret.
I've also heard a lot of people say to other people in trying to console them if they're having fertility challenges, you can always adopt. Like it's a sort of a second place option.
Besides the fact that it's insulting and rude and it's none of their business, it's very expensive
Yep.
and it's scary because no one wants to talk about it. Now, older, wiser with a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old and two open adoptions, I'm thinking I'm pretty good at this, but no one told me it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
No one told me that it was going to be fine. No one told me that my kids could possibly be well adjusted and that these birth parents weren't going to come and try to kidnap like no one told me that. So I understand why people like freak out. But the just adopt, I'm like, just the process alone is so difficult.
It's funny in a gay relationship
Um,
though, because when Patrick, my husband, and I got engaged and then married, people of course were like, "Oh, are you gonna
which
adopt?"
I love.
Yes, which
Which I love.
and this is the kind of relationship where adoption is seen as the gold medal, not the silver medal, right? They're like, "Oh, are you gonna adopt?" And now it's more like, "Are you gonna adopt? Are you gonna do surrogacy? Are you gonna foster?" But I thought, how funny to have it flipped, where people are excited and open and positive about it, not it being like you can always adopt if things don't.
Yeah, it was such a consolation prize from people with me. And it's interesting because as my girls got older and they started to learn what infertility meant and IVF and miscarriage and all this stuff, they were sort of like, Mom, we're so sorry. And I go, but see, here's the thing. It was sad in the moment, but had I had any clue, girls, how amazing this could be, the stress level in my life, the anxiety, the angst, the oh my God, what's wrong with me? I could have left that at the door if we were more open about this. And that's the piece why I can't shut up because I'm like, my kids are amazing. And my Jane's birth mother and I talked about this the other night because I said, I hope you don't think this is trite. It was the night before her 20th birthday. We're closer than close. You can tell me. And I go, I feel like I was born to be her mother.
Mm,
But that
mm.
means that you had to go through hell and back again for me to do that. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, it was my honor to go through hell and back again for you because I couldn't be a mother. I couldn't give her the life I wanted to give her. You could. That's why I picked you. I wanted her to have the life you were living. And then
Yes.
we're both sitting there going, you had the harder road. No, you had the harder road. And I was like, oh, these conversations are so important because of the outsiders who tell us what they're thinking and what we should do. And they don't really know. The outside judgment about it that you should adopt is really a kicker. Because some women really want to be pregnant. They'd rather do an egg donor than adopt because their pregnancy is the issue. Me, no. I didn't care so much about pregnancy. It was being a mom. And so there's all these other different psychological aspects that come into it all.
And it's invasive in any case. I've joked with, because when we got married, people they would sometimes just say, "Are you guys going to have kids?" And I would, again, in my acerbic way, I said, "I think I'm barren."
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, why? How do you just ask that of people? It's
Well,
not.
as your infertile friend who is barren, I'll be your surrogate.
Yes, exactly. So I was just like, you're just gonna like casually drop that on couples. And I want to try to help socialize people and be like, that's really not your business.
And from the heterosexual side of it, you have one,
Yeah.
only having another. I'm like,
Oh,
Jesus.
yes.
I mean, it's why'd you stop at two? And I'm like, because I ran out of money.
And
It
how
cost so
surprised
much.
would they have been if they had learned that we had a failed adoption? So it's like,
Versus
you're really just gonna ask strangers that?
there's no boundaries when it
No.
comes to all this. But that's what gives you material. That's what gives me material because I'm just trying to get it all out there because if it's not taboo to talk about, maybe it'll become more normalized and no one will have their heart broken when someone says the wrong thing to them because it is. It's a journey.
I do
Sure.
public speaking that is always tends to be more serious, but I've said before, it's like whether I have a punchline or a PowerPoint, the topics that I cover are pretty much the same. And I like inviting people into conversations in both ways.
Well, let's talk about the diversity inclusion speaking that you do, because that is why helpusadopt.org exists. Because adoption land is very whitewashed, very
Mhm.
heterosexual, very Christian. And I decided 18 years ago that I wanted to create something in adoption land that was inclusive.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that fact. I love that we help single parents and LGBT parents and people of color. We're just building families, period. So I have a lot of inclusion conversations. And when you told me you went to Bloomberg and
Mhm.
talked to the employees there, let's talk about that, because
Yeah.
people want to see themselves. Not every day, but
Yeah,
it's
that was
nice to see
that was
your face.
honor and a great invite to be asked to come to Bloomberg Philanthropies and speak to their intern program, which was almost exclusively BIPOC young leaders who are in high school who want to somehow find a world of the arts in some way. And they wanted to have somebody speak who might be more relatable to them than, say, Mike Bloomberg, who is a great speaker, as is Patty Harris, but they wanted someone that these kids could look at and say, oh, okay.
You know, Patty Harris went to my college.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so
She's
funny.
like the shining star. I went to Franklin and Marshall. She is like the
She's
shining star from
She's
Franklin and Marshall.
yes, and constantly on the move and constantly making new
Very capable, so
yes.
smart.
Obviously, they're going into senior year of high school, so I wanted to be hopeful, but I also wanted to give them some sort of dose of reality about what it means to be othered, and so I talked a little bit about adoption and also just being a person of color in the working world. I have another talk similar in content for City University of New York. I'll be able to push it a little bit, I think, because they're college students and they're about to enter the workforce. And what does that mean? And I talk a little bit about the evolution of understanding of adoption. When I was adopted, the right thing to say was, I don't see color. I'm colorblind. We're all just humans. And great. And now we've evolved into more of what I think Claudia Rankin says it the best. If you can't see race, you can't see racism. And of course, people can see racism, even if they have their theories about it. And also the idea of I'm not political. Do you live in this world? If you live in this world, then you are into politics. You cannot live in America and not have race or difference somehow be a factor. And so those are sort of the pillars of a lot of the conversations I have with younger people. And it's very helpful because you can't really be cynical when you talk to audiences like that, right? Because cynicism, that only supports the status quo. And if you believe in change and progress and changing context, especially around the kinds of issues that we're talking about, then you have to let that go. And so for me, just personally, like selfishly, it's been great to speak to those kinds of audiences because
That's great.
at 46, you can be very cynical about change. If it is it possible? And then you see these kids and you're like, oh yes, change is coming.
I get the old comment now that I'm a 55-year-old woman, talk about in the workplace. Are you thinking about retiring? I'm like, that's a pointed question. I'm like, no, I'm just getting going. But it's so,
You're like, I am right
judged in
now.
a workplace, no matter what you look like, your gender, anything, they will find something to judge you on. And it's just let me be.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
I've been called everything in the workplace exotic. Again, though, with the experience of learning difference so young as a child, it always just flies out of my mouth. And it's like, yeah, from the jungles of Minnesota and Virginia, you have something ready to say because it wasn't bullying, but you learn how to have that reflex
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
young age if you've been othered.
Yeah. So I don't know what my last question to you should be. You have a choice. Ready?
Okay.
It's
All right.
choose your own adventure with Becky Fawcett.
Okay.
So we can either talk about adoption bullying, which I have a real opinion on, or we can do quick fire with Becky Fawcett, which I make my kids do, and I film them and I post it.
Oh my God.
It's very cute.
As a comedian, I'm going to do quick fire.
Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Best thing about being adopted.
The notion of chosen family and how beautiful it is.
Worst thing about being adopted.
Pity from people who don't understand it.
What do you want to change about adoption?
I want people to understand that it is not something that is associated necessarily with some sort of horrible trauma. There's so many stories, you can't put them all in one box.
What do you want the world to know about adoption?
There's a lot of us out there, that it's this really special community. To be curious about it, not afraid, or talk about it in hushed tones. That's what I get a lot when I perform.
I do a big bit. See, I'm not a comedian. You're going to have to train me. I do a big bit on adoption should not be whispered.
Yes.
All right. And the last thing is, what do you think is the one most important thing about adoption?
Oh, it's living proof that family is not about DNA. It's about who you choose.
So it's interesting. So my best thing about adoption is Jane Brooke, which is
Mm,
not one best thing, it's two best things.
right.
The worst thing about adoption, I guess I have to speak in a different tense because I'm not adopted, I'm adoptive. Is that the word? Adoptive is the way the world reacts to stigma. The one thing I want to change is the cost, which is what I do. I help us adopt because it's just not affordable, which means kids are being kept from the homes that want them. And the one thing that I think is the most important thing about adoption, if I had to pick, it parallels with what you said. It is so easy to love a child that didn't come from your body. That's it.
Yep.
It's instinct. Like the minute they went in my arms, I was worried about it because
Mm.
people tell you, like, it's not your DNA. The baby didn't grow in your stomach. They're not growing in your stomach anyway, but that's what everybody calls it. But the minute those babies went in my arms, it was like they melted into me. It's so easy.
Yeah, and how many families do we know where the family members really don't have anything in common other than their DNA? They have
Yep.
no shared political views. They don't like the same things. They don't get along particularly. They may not even love each other.
It's fascinating. And that's it. I love your be curious about adoption. I always tell people adoptee stories started way before they ever took their first breath in this world. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who wants to share their story with you, or a birth mother who placed, even from my perspective of how I just could not give up on my second child, it was the hardest thing ever. Like these stories are so fascinating and they're not random. There's nothing random about adoption. I believe that. Maybe you disagree with me, but from my end, I have the children I was meant to have. Again,
Sure.
I'm sorry for
Yeah.
what the birth mothers went through, and we talk about that, but they're my kids through and through.
There's a great quote in the amazing show Fleabag where a character says, "There's nothing more exciting than a room full of people." For introverts like my husband, he would firmly disagree. But for me, as a comedian, there is nothing more exciting than a room full of people because in that there's multiplicity of stories. And when
So
you
interesting.
meet an adopted person, their story is inherently going to be interesting. So again, be curious about it and yeah.
Be curious about it. I love that. I love that. You are such a fun guy. I mean, we could keep going, but we have to call it a day.
I
So
was like, "Oh, I need
tell everybody, and he really is very funny. I didn't let him be this funny on this one. We had to really talk about the serious side of adoption and get
yeah.
really deep insights, Jonah. I mean, it's so important. It really is so important. Thank you for sharing that with everybody.
And thank you for
And
making
tell everybody where they can find you because maybe someone's going to show up in your audience and say, are you going to
yes.
ask? Because I'm here.
Yes. I would say for the young listeners, TikTok handle Nigh Jonah Nighjonah, and then website www.jonahnigh.com. Easiest way. And then you can see my performance schedule and not just performing at comedy, but also the public talks that I'm doing. I'm going to Minneapolis next week to do a conference for adoptees and foster care alumni.
Oh, that's great. Well, here's to a long friendship between
Yeah.
you and me and many more fun things together. I forgot to tell everybody you emceed our Philadelphia gala a few weeks ago and you were great. Everybody loved you.
Oh, good.
I did let him be funny there. He was
Yes,
allowed.
reviews are in. Good.
No, people really liked what you had to say, and that whole room thinks adoptees are pretty special. So that's
Yeah, it was
cool.
a very, very fun performance.
30 seconds with Becky Fawcett. So you just listened to my very interesting conversation with my friend Jonah Nigh, who is Asian, and he had white parents, as he told you in the talk. And he was saying as a kid that he got teased, that he wasn't adopted because the other children said, "You're not Black." And I was reminded of a story where Jane, her first time at summer camp, told some kids that she was adopted. And for those of you listening, Jane is Caucasian with strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. And she said, "I'm adopted." And they said, "No, you're not. You can't be adopted." And she said, "Why not?" "What do you mean? Of course I'm adopted." And they said, "Well, you're not Asian." And Jonah and I talked about that. Like, the big question is, what does adoption look like? Coined a phrase in 18 years in my work and trademarked it called Faces of Adoption. So fascinating because everybody's face is theirs. However you look, however you choose to present, the story is yours and no one can take it away from you. 30 Seconds with Becky Fawcett. Thank you for listening to the Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you were here today. And here's to seeing the world a little differently and possibly using your voice to make a difference. You can follow the Fawcett Report on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And you can message me on Instagram or Facebook. And I will actually respond as long as you're not mean. You can disagree with me, you can share your point of view, but you can't be mean because I don't do mean. And finally, if you're curious about my adoption advocacy and family building work through helpusadopt.org, you can find us there on Instagram and Facebook, as well as through the website, helpusadopt.org. See you next time.